Diolch yn fawr a diolch am y gwahoddiad yma. Heddiw I siarad yma, yn braf eto gweld gymaint o bobl wedi troi allan. I'm going to talk for a while now, and I'm very conscious of the fact, and I'm sure you are as well. Morlais would much prefer to do tidal energy than to talk about it. And I'm sure this is true of us all. And I'm envious of people who are doing it, and the technology people and the work that they're doing needs to be celebrated. Let's hope that we can give them a home that is worthwhile. The good and the bad news from this morning. When we arrived this morning, it was pouring down with rain. And there were two buildings, and we didn't know which building to go to. The good news, we saw Martin and David and Oshan walking purposefully towards this building. We thought, they know what they're doing, we'll follow them. Bad news, it was the wrong building. Mind you, they do know what they're doing, I'm not trying to. They do absolutely know what they're doing. The good news about the wrong building was that they sold umbrellas. Good news. Bad news was, I'm not going to tell you how much I paid for a bloody umbrella. The good news was we arrived at the correct building in the end, and it's wonderful to be, because sometimes we all feel isolated, don't we? It's good to be in a room full of people with a common interest. That was the good and the bad news. Now the parable. A grandfather buys his granddaughter a jigsaw because the granddaughter loves doing jigsaws. There's 300 pieces to it. When she opens up the wrapping, she finds that the jigsaw box has no picture on it. So she asks her grandfather, why is there no picture? And he says, well, it's a test. I want you to see if you can complete this jigsaw without the picture. So the little girl, who likes tests as well, started work, found the corners, found the edges, started working her way in, realized after a while that all she had to work with was pieces fitting together well. There was no reference point for where to locate objects in the area within the frame. She was for about a month doing the jigsaw. And she says to her grandfather, I've completed it. And he was delighted. And he says, well done, you should be very proud of yourself. At which point the granddaughter's mother comes up and says to her father, what in God's name are you doing to this little girl? And he said, well, you know, life is like that jigsaw, trying to create coherence out of incoherence, trying to build something when you don't have all of the knowledge that you require in advance. I'm testing her imagination, I'm testing her determination to build things in life. And she passed, that little girl. You're wondering what the image was at the end? It was an image of a port at sunset in Gothenburg, because one day I was in Gothenburg and a magnificent sunset falling over, everything bathed in a wonderful warm glow. I was with Martin, actually, and that's what the image on the box was. But really, it's a very tidy link into my next jigsaw, which is Morlais. I'm not going to talk about Morlais, what it is, because I'm sure that most of you know by now. I'm sure most of you know that there were 3 demonstration zones. I believe I'm correct in saying that Morlais is the only one that is progressing. It has a singular, very simple aim, and that aim is to become a plug-and-play zone by 2023 for diverse technologies. We have lots of things in place. We have a timely plan that is deliverable. What we don't know, and there are 2 don't knows, really, major don't knows, in our jigsaw. One of them is what the extent of our consent will be, and the other is the £9 million that we require in order to match the European Regional Development Fund money that is available to us to complete the infrastructure on Morlais. Those are the 2 unknowns. Everything else is progressing according to plan. And we are making progress on the 9 million as well, which I will report back to you on in a moment. If we'll look at an updated timeline, we're on target to present our final EIA bid to NRW in July. If some of you are noticing that Johnny Lewis looks a little older these days, it's because he's working on our EIA. Poor man. It's a complex project because it has multiple devices involved. It's a large area. It's an area of outstanding natural beauty. A lot of things are making it a complex project. But we are very keen to ensure that we work in a cooperative way with the regulators and not allow the process to become adversarial, because I don't believe that that's to anybody's advantage. We are confident of being able to achieve our aim by 2023. We are working, the Morlais team is working like that little girl on the jigsaw. We have signed up partners in this endeavour. We have 8. I'm able to announce today that HydroQuest, a company from France, has signed agreements with us. We are in discussion with 3 others, one from France, one from Spain, and one from North America. But we have 8 developers who have signed up that we are working with, that are part of our community of interest and that have stayed with us. Please note that even Tocardo have stayed with us in this community. We are also working with Minesto on the shared infrastructure aspects of this project, and always will. This is the infrastructure work that will need to be completed under Morlais B, taking us from the point of connection to the transmission network. One of the major advantages we have, as I've probably noted before, is that we have a spur from the national grid that terminates 4 kilometres from the landing point. And it means that Morlais is expandable and future-proofed in terms of grid. There are, as with every complex project, a bonfire of dependencies and sub-dependencies, if we look into them in detail, which I'm not going to. Securing infrastructure funding agreements in this calendar year is a pressing issue for us. We are in discussion with 2 equity providers. We are also on the heads of terms list for the North Wales Growth Deal, which is UK government's fund for, similar to the Swansea City Deal strategy. Morlais is on the list of projects that are being submitted for the North Wales Growth Deal for that 9 million. It will mean that the public sector would be doing most of the infrastructure work on this project, something I don't believe is inappropriate. The private sector funding, as we all know, comes when the infrastructure is in place, because huge sums of money have to be spent in deploying the turbines, and that's when the private sector bring in their side of the bargain. We are also aware that the extent of consent, as I mentioned earlier, the appetite and capacity of developers in 2022, 2023 is important. Some of it will depend on the nature of and extent of revenue support. The electricity market is changing. Is exporting to grid the only thing to do these days, or is exporting to local use possible? Tidal energy is flexible. It's local generation. Hybrid ships are on their way. Hybrid trucks are on their way. Hydrogen trucks are on their way. 1,000 trucks go through the port of Holyhead every day carrying goods to and from the Irish Republic. I know this because I go past my house. We are getting an enormous amount of help from WEFO, as Martin mentioned earlier. Welsh Government are helping us greatly. We've had a lot of help from the Nuclear Decommissioning Authority, who see a great deal of value in this. We have an expanded staff, and we have better quality governance in Morlais now, and that's made things a lot easier for us and allowed us to press on more purposefully. We have a good consenting team working with Royal Haskoning and with Marine Space. We have a good technology developer community that I described to you earlier. The North Wales Economic Ambition Board is very keen on Morlais. North Wales local authorities, all of them, have provided letters of support. So the business sector likes us, the community sector likes us. We did our first public information day in Llangolch near Holyhead 2 weeks ago. Public opinion is overwhelmingly favourable to tidal stream technology, overwhelmingly favourable. There are some hindrances. I won't mention the first one, but I'm sure you can see it. There are consent challenges. It's a costly business. You have to pay for consultation with NRW, with PINs, also on the marine licensing side. It's an expensive business. Another thing I'm worried about, because at the moment, Wales is quite bold. We are making strong statements politically, all the way up and down the hierarchy, it's bold. I hope that boldness continues and won't be allowed to be knocked off its line by an item of bad news here or there. It's important that we retain our bravery in terms of tidal energy, because it's got to be a critically important part of what Wales offers the world in time. There are many positives. This sector is much more resilient than I thought it was. I've been impressed by that. I'm also impressed by the fact that many technology developers are prosecuting costs and are going to be able to produce the electricity perhaps cheaper than what was initially envisaged. The weight of inward investment, a 100 megawatt project will bring in £400 million of inward investment into North West Wales. It's a substantial amount of money. We are planning and business modelling for two types of project, because we have to. We don't know what the picture on the jigsaw box looks like for certain. So we have to model for the grid export, we have to model for a local energy system, and we have to plan and model for something in between. All that work has been done and is being done. We're on target for consent submission. My final word, and I'm stopping then. This is no ordinary jigsaw. We've had some people very eloquently explaining why this sector is important in Wales. The people in the town where I was brought up, in Holyhead, this is important to them. To the town, it's important because its economic development looks dull without there being something of this sort. For the region, North West Wales, critically important. For the nation, for the planet, as we've heard earlier on. And you know, truly transformative rewards only come about when the tasks are difficult and the conditions are challenging. From the discovery of antibiotics to the writing of the human genome. I've just written a book about, sorry, I've just read a book about the gene, and realizing the decades of sweat and labor that went into being able to come up with a proper coded description of the human genome is incredible. It's transformative, but it was hell to produce. So if Morlais is hell, it's because it's going to be transformative. And I'm going to say something now. We will get Morlais done. And I'll come back in 4 years and prove it to you.